I'd like to call our meeting to order. Welcome everyone this evening, and then those who are streaming from the comfort of home, welcome to our meeting this evening. I'd like to call it to order. Roll call. Deputy Mayor McKetty and Councillor Tonio are on personal leave this evening. So members of council, welcome to our meeting. Report out. We did have, for the members in the audience, a closed meeting of council was just held in accordance with and as permitted with section 239(2) CE of the Municipal Act 2001, which states that a meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. E, litigation or potential litigation, including matter before administrative tribunals affected the municipality or a local board. During this meeting, council gave further direction to administration on both potential litigation matter and proposed acquisition of two land matters. So we have a moment of silence, and then we'll stand for the national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Before we start, members of council will do the land acknowledgement, and that we acknowledge that we are in the land that's surrounded by water, originally inhabited by indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Lenni, Lenape, allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat people, and Caldwell First Nation. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward, respectively, with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. To the members present, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda as presented? Councilor Houston.
Yes, I do through you. Just item 2023-53, the Gwen Drain Tender Award. I will declare on that.
All right, thank you. We'll
Thank
have
you.
that duly noted. Thank you. Anything further? No, hearing none. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes. We have the minutes of the regular council meeting of July the 11th, and the recommendation is that they were duplicated and delivered to the members and should be adopted. Moved by Councilor Houston, Councilor Jobin. Support. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The minutes are carried. Thank you. Supplementary agenda adoption. We have a supplementary item added to the regular meeting agenda regarding report DS 2023-14. That's a summary of draft Tecumseh Housing Action Plan should be approved. So move the supplementary. Councillor Houston and Councillor Higginson support. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. So with that, members of council will move to delegations, and we do have the new Housing Action Plan, Federal Housing Accelerating Fund, and I will ask our director, Mr. Hillman, to introduce our guests and also to bring, also to talk on the report DS 2023-14. Mr. Hillman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to everyone. Just very briefly, I will just summarize sort of the context here, and then I'll get Larry moving on with the PowerPoint. So council will recall that the federal government announced a $4 billion housing action plan in March of this year. And the intent is to accelerate the construction of 100,000 homes, housing units across Canada. This housing action plan creates a housing acceleration fund and an application process that is available to municipalities. And it's intended to support some very critical priorities, which is the development of complete communities that are walkable, appropriate residential densities with a diverse mix of land uses. Affordable housing, inclusive, equitable, and diverse communities should come out of this process of a housing action plan and supporting the development of low carbon and climate resilient communities. The submission that would go into the federal government through CMHC requires that a housing action plan is mandatory. That action plan has to be adopted by council. And in order to go into the program, it has to identify housing supply growth targets, which reflect the total number of permitted housing units projected with the support afforded by the Housing Acceleration Fund. Additional targets related to the type of housing projected, as well as affordable housing, and a minimum of 7 proposed initiatives that will help achieve the committed targets, speed up approvals, and support the objective of the programs. The council dealt with this through report DS 2023-09, where it authorized the hiring of a consultant to assist with the preparation of a housing action plan. The town does not, nor has it ever had, a housing action plan as a document. And actually quite rare. And we can see that part of this program is getting municipalities to buy into the notion of, if we're going to solve the housing crisis, a housing action plan is a very important tool for the municipality to have to prioritize its efforts. So to that end, with the approval of funds to hire a consultant, Larry Solani of Miller Solani Inc. was retained by the town. And I will just indicate that we have been working on for the last 2 months with a number of members of our senior administration team, the preparation of a housing action plan. Larry will go through a PowerPoint that highlights how we've developed the plan, the outcomes of the plan, the findings from the plan. And then, Mr. Mayor, what I would propose is that when he's complete, I'll just address some of the financial implications of this program and how it could be of benefit to the municipality. So with that, Mr. Solani's out on the West Coast and has been transported via the internet and is here to present the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Brian. Mayor McNamara and members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening to speak with you. Unfortunately, I can't be there in person. I'm out on, as Brian indicated, in British Columbia visiting my daughter. So, but through technology, this is a great opportunity to speak with you about this exciting program. I think this is a real great opportunity for the town of Tecumseh to really move forward with some initiatives that are going to have not only short-term kind of immediate impacts, but also provide some opportunities for some transformative type changes to the planning approval and regulatory process to assist the town move forward with respect to providing additional housing for a broad cross-section of the community. So as Brian indicated, there is under the Housing Accelerator Fund, there's a number of objectives. And again, I won't go through all of the details, but just to highlight a couple of things that I think are very noteworthy. One of the real driving forces behind this program by the federal government is they really want to accelerate housing, get communities to move forward with initiatives that are really going to stimulate the construction of housing across Canada And as Brian indicated, they're looking at 100,000 units being accelerated in the next 3 years. The other thing was to look at trying to make some improvements, streamlining, and finding ways to create more certainty and predictability in the approval process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes when we talk about the stakeholder consultation that we undertook. Next slide. So the Housing Action Plan, it's really meant to do two things. In order to qualify for funding under this federal program, it is a program requirement. If you don't have a Housing Action Plan with the minimum of 7 initiatives and the housing targets included in there, adopted by council, a municipality would not qualify to apply for funding. The other part of the action plan is to look at ways in which we can start to build capacity within the community to look at how do we bring in partnerships, community partners, both in the public and the private sector and in the nonprofit sector, and use this action plan as a way to start to bring that together in a more formal manner that will provide kind of long-lasting changes and much needed collaboration, recognizing that municipalities like the town of Tecumseh doesn't build housing per se, but requires partnerships and collaboration and buy-in from a number of key stakeholders in the community to bring those homes to fruition. The other thing is that this is really an opportunity to solve an affordable, or not really solve, because I mean, there's many things that have to be done to solve the housing problem that we're facing across Canada, but it's really a step to recognize that there is a housing affordability problem, and that includes in the town of Tecumseh for a segment of the households. And this is an opportunity using these action plans to move forward with initiatives that are going to start to address some of those systemic issues. Next slide. So what we did is we looked at a number of demographic characteristics and in the community, and we looked at building activity. And I brought forward here some key information that is included in greater detail in the actual action plan. Over the last 10 years, we've seen approximately 800 new dwelling units built in the community. And about 60%, 6 in 10 of those units are townhouse and apartments. So again, that's recognizing a shift in the market. If you were to look at building activity 10 years ago, you wouldn't see that. But in the last, especially the last 5 years, there's been a tremendous uptake in building activity when it comes to apartments, townhouses, both rental and condominium form of ownership. So that is quite significant shift that has taken place in Tecumseh and throughout the Windsor-Essex region. Next slide. 87% of the housing stock, though, is still primarily low-density residential type housing units, primarily single and some semi-detached dwellings. And what's interesting is most of that housing, 3/4 of it, 75%, was built prior to 2000. So only 1,100 units in Tecumseh of the 8,900 dwelling units that currently exist have been built in the last 20 years. Next slide. In terms of households, 50% of the households in the town of Tecumseh, based on the 2021 census, were 1- and 2-person households. And here you can see a comparison between the town data, which is in green, and the Canada-wide data, which is shown in the bar graph in blue. 90% of all households in Tecumseh as of 2021 were owners of their own homes, whereas across the country, there's a greater proportion of folks that rent their accommodations. 67% own housing across Canada, whereas in Tecumseh, it's 90%. Next slide. This is an interesting piece of data, and it has relevance in terms of some of the initiatives that you'll see in the action plan itself. Tecumseh is a affluent community, as we all know. However, within a community such as Tecumseh, there are still, a significant proportion of the households that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So this is based on 2021 data, and you can see here that 1,000 Tecumseh households were spending more than 30% of their annual income on housing. And that is primarily concentrated in the rental market. You can see there that 30% of all tenant-led households, folks that are renting, are paying more than 30% of their income on housing, where in the ownership sector, it's about 10% of households. And this was, again, 2021 data. Next slide. In terms of existing land supply, the town has a large amount of residentially designated land, primarily in the Tecumseh Hamlet area. There are also some pockets of land in the Maidstone and the Oldcastle area, and they're shown in green here as the greenfield areas on this particular figure. 1,500 of those units that are projected that could be accommodated on those lands could be built in what is known as the Tecumseh Hamlet Area 1A. And that's the area north of intersection. So on the western side of the Tecumseh Hamlet, that's in the Greenfield area, north of intersection, about 1/4 of all of the new households that could be accommodated on the existing land supply are located in that area. Next slide. In terms of looking at a growth forecast, when we met over the last 4 to 8 weeks with Brian and senior administrative staff, we looked at a number of factors to come up with the housing target that's included in the presentation, but it's described in greater detail in the action plan itself. One of the things to note is that the forecast that were based on work that was done countywide last year by Watson and Associates are projecting that over the course of the next 3 decades, the town is going to grow at a much higher rate as compared to the last 2 decades. And between 2021 and 2051, it's projected to grow by between 400 and 600 persons per year being added to the community, with a population in 2051 somewhere between 35 and 42,000. That is the most recent forecast that is available and was done for each of the municipalities in Essex County. To meet that anticipated demand in terms of growth in the community, the town will need to add between 5,500 and 7,900 new housing units, and that equates to about 182 to 262 new units per year over the course of the next 3 decades. Next slide. We also took a look at, as developing the housing targets, we looked at the CMHC Housing Market Outlook. They prepare individual market outlooks for all of the census metropolitan areas across Canada. And the most recent one that is available was in the spring of 2023. And so there's some interesting findings in there based on the analysis that CMHC staff have undertaken. There's viewing that higher mortgage rates and the long-term lack of supply will make homeownership even less affordable in Tecumseh in the coming years. And this challenge of affordability in the home ownership market is going to drive up demand in the rental units. And that's going to be adding to the demand that's coming from immigration that's coming into this region. The greater rental demand is going to lead to tighter conditions in the housing market. And they're projecting even higher rents in the rental market in the next few years. The other constraint that is an issue that needs to be tackled in this region is there's a lack of skilled labor for construction, and that's impacting the ability to create new housing at a rate that is needed to meet the growing demand in Tecumseh and across all of Windsor, Essex. This report also identified that over the course of the next 3 years. It's expected that a lot of the housing that's going to be built is going to be the multi-res, and that could be the low-rise residential type apartments and also townhouse type development is what CMHC is forecasting. Next slide. We met with a number of community stakeholders as part of the background work leading up to the preparation of this housing action plan. And that was both with the private sector and the nonprofit sector. Here are a few of the key takeaways. Again, further information and more detail is in the action plan itself, but I tried to bring out a couple of things that I think were important to highlight. Is that there's more than 6,000 people currently on the central housing waiting list for the region. Many of those folks are waiting more than 10 years to obtain access to social housing, and more than 60 of those residents live in the town of Tecumseh. The lack of service subdivided and zoned land is one of the biggest problems facing not only the for-profit sector, but also the nonprofit sector in terms of being able to deliver new housing. We also, through our discussions, we saw that there's a strong interest to pursue partnership. There's a number of partnership opportunities that are available with the nonprofit sector to create additional housing, particularly in the area of rental and affordable housing in Tecumseh. Home builders are having a difficult time getting an adequate supply of labor. And again, that's impacting not only Tecumseh, but all of the communities in southwestern Ontario. And the last one that we wanted to highlight is across the region. We've heard from the building community is that there's a processing challenge that in terms of getting approvals and permits, and this is a quote from the president of the Home Builders Association, is that you meet the requirements and then the goalposts move. So there is some frustration in the private sector with respect to the processing and the development approval process. And again, that's not specific to Tecumseh. That was referenced to the region as a whole. Next slide. So with all of that, and again, there were a number of other indicators that we looked at, and those are again set out in greater detail in the action plan itself. In terms of arriving at the housing target, and this is a requirement for the program to qualify, is over the next 3 years, what we are projecting is that there will be a total number of units to be permitted with the assistance of the Housing Action Fund would be 504 over the course of 3 years. Without the action plan funding, the half funding, it would be considerably less, only 237 units. So the additional units that are permitted with this assistance would more than double the number of units that otherwise would be constructed over the course of the next 3 years. And that's really important because that's what this program is geared towards, is to accelerate housing that otherwise would not be constructed in that time horizon. Next slide. So within the action plan, we also generated with the assistance and collaboration with Brian and his team and senior administrative staff there, 5 goals and 10 initiatives. And I'll just quickly go over those. The first one is to increase the town's housing supply, to accelerate new housing construction, and to meet a growing demand for housing. So that speaks to the supply side. The second one is to improve housing affordability in both the rental and ownership housing sectors. Third one is to diversify the housing stock in the community. Fourth one is to streamline municipal approvals. And the fifth goal is to engage, collaborate, and educate. And then you'll see when we talk about the initiatives, they fall within those goals that are set out in the action plan. Next slide. So as Brian mentioned in the introduction, the program requires that a community of the size of Tecumseh has to put forward and be committed to follow through with at least 7 initiatives. And these initiatives will be funded as part of the application, would be funded through this federal funding. And you have to set out project milestones in the application form themselves, and also indicate, what level of construction or activity would be generated as a result of these initiatives. So that has to be put forward in greater detail in the application form itself. So I'll just quickly go over these. I won't read them, but instead just kind of highlight them. The first one is speaking to, again, the notion of trying to broaden the diversity of housing in the community, particularly in the low density residential areas by pre-zoning lands. The new official plan for the town speaks to this, and a application going forward, rather than someone coming forward and doing site-specific applications of on a one-by-one basis. This initiative would be to go forward and pre-zone lands in some of your low-density residential districts to allow semi-detached in addition to singles as of right. The second initiative speaks to in the Main Street community improvement area is to pre-zone some of the lands in there to allow the missing middle housing forms, and that would be your fourplex, sixplex, low rise, similar to what's been built on L'Esperance Road and what's been built in certain parts of the Tecumseh Road corridor. But to go and broaden that so that individuals don't necessarily have to go through individual rezonings, but they would be pre-zoned and put it possibly in a holding category to again expedite and promote that type of development in a more timely fashion. The third initiative is to take a look at the Manning Road Commercial District and to move forward with a land use official plan zoning bylaw amendment that would allow more intensification in that area as part of a mixed use development, or even it could be some freestanding development in that area in some underutilized sites in that corridor. The fourth initiative, sorry, next slide, speaks to looking at revised parking requirements. And again, this wouldn't apply across the board. This would be looking at specific areas where some of the parking requirements, possibly along your transit corridor or in areas where there are nearby municipal parking lots that are available, of reducing some of the parking standards in those areas to, again, provide the more of an incentive to intensify development along those transit corridors. The fifth initiative builds on some of the work that has been done already as part of your community improvement plan for your Main Street area, to be looking at providing some additional incentives, including reduced development charge, planning fees, and the property tax equivalent program for purpose-built rental and affordable housing. So again, this wouldn't be to open to all types of multi-unit development. It would be targeted towards units or buildings that are purpose-built for rental or affordable housing. Next slide. This one is with the next two are with respect to ARUs, the accessory residential units. The province has made some changes to the planning legislation in Ontario, and this builds on that. With respect to eliminating, I'll speak to Initiative 7 first, eliminating building permits fees for ARUs as an incentive for a 3-year period. So this program runs for 3 years. This initiative would coincide with that 3-year period as an incentive to encourage individuals to build these units within the community and do so in a fashion that would be in an accelerated timeline horizon. And Initiative 6 is to assist with that, is to prepare a user-friendly information kit explaining how individuals, homeowners can add these to their existing properties, provide some illustrative design guidelines and examples, and then outline a simplified and streamlined process to obtain a building permit. We don't expect that there's going to be a large uptake in this in the 3 years, but there could be with these incentives and these types of streamlined processes and guidelines. There's certainly going to be an uptake when people recognize that this is a way to provide some housing for some of their family members, or to get some extra income to help pay for housing cost. And then Initiative 8 is to take a look at parcels of land in the community, and these could be publicly owned, or they could be ones that The town partners with community partners to look at making those lands available in partnership with a nonprofit sector for affordable housing development and pre-zoning that site or sites. Initiative 9 is the next slide. The town has moved forward with an e-permitting system and is working to operationalize that for the building permits. And this would build on that by having a new e-processing system to expedite and streamline all of the planning related applications. And that could be minor variances, plans of subdivision, all types of different planning applications to move forward in a way that builds on the work that's being done with the building permits. And then the final initiative that we've had discussions on, and this was supported by our discussions with the various stakeholders, is to create a new housing advisory panel that comprises representatives from the nonprofit, private, and public sectors that would advise council on housing related matters, collaborate and partner with the town on certain projects that come forward that are identified, and accelerate timelines associated with construction and expanding housing choices. So this is would require a terms of reference to be developed and some structure to be put in place in order for it to be effective. But there seemed to be pretty broad support to have not just the initial discussion that took place as part of developing this action plan, but to keep those discussions going in a more formal way by creating this type of an advisory panel. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian, and I'm available if you have any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Solani. And so, yeah, Brian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Larry, for the presentation. And just before we get to council questions, to close on the report that we have put in front of council. Firstly, to explain, the draft Housing Action Plan is just now being completed. As you can appreciate, this was a project not originally identified as part of our work program. So our intent is that we will make it available to council by email by the end of this week, end of Thursday of this week, so that you have time to digest it and review it. It's a fairly clear document. And we would like to, and we're proposing to bring it forward for adoption at the August 8th meeting. We must have it adopted and approved in order to file an application on August 18th. And there is some significance to that because we think we stand to gain as a municipality, certainly financially, and to address the housing issue that Larry's just summarized. So the purpose of tonight was we want to get some feedback from council if there's any, and to consider that and make any last minute changes if required. And also to emphasize that the Housing Action Plan is really intended to be a first generation document for the municipality. We see that this will become a document that has some permanency in the sort of the toolbox available to municipalities, and to have council approved documents that really place an emphasis on housing. So this Housing Action Plan will, I suspect, go well beyond my time here and a number of us, and it will have an important, it'll be an important tool to continually advance the importance and the needs of housing in the community. So we really do see it as an important document. And I think that's why the federal program is really pushing that adoption. Finally, financial implications. So the Housing Action Plan, what it does, it identifies housing that we think can be accelerated through the advancement of certain initiatives, which have been reviewed by Larry. And in summary, our report for August 8th will get into a little bit more detail to break this down. But based on our current calculations, we're projecting an additional 267 housing units could be permitted over the 3-year program because of half assistance. And the town may, as a result, qualify for funding of between $5 and $7 million, depending on the breakdown of unit types and the proportion of affordable units. We'll get into more detail for the August 8th report, Mr. Mayor. It is anticipated that the half funding will first go to the initiatives and fund initiatives that would require perhaps support by external consultants, certain expenditures. The balance of the funds that are remaining are available to the municipality for use on capital projects, which would have a direct impact on accelerating housing development. Given the town's initiatives with its 10-year capital plan, we think that there is quite a pool of opportunities there. for some capital projects. And then just finally, Mr. Mayor, our recommendation tonight is that this summary report be received. Larry and I are both certainly open to questions on this matter.
All right, thank you very much, both Mr. Hillman and certainly Mr. Solani. A very good report, and it's almost like you've done kind of a SWOT, of the community. There are strengths and weaknesses and opportunities, obviously. Your item, I think the number 10, when you talked about engaging with the stakeholders and then the nonprofits and the builders, I think is a great suggestion. I know about a year, not quite a year ago, 9 months ago at the Beach Grove, all the mayors in the community, and I know the CAO were there, and it was put forward by the Builders Association, the housing building people, and a lot of real estate folks in the room and developers, et cetera. And it was, I thought a great initiative at the time. I think we left the meeting at that time and I said, these gatherings I think are critical for us to move forward as a community, because, when everybody says we need more housing, I get that. More affordable housing, I get that. But the biggest issue is how do we get there? And, the biggest questions the developers are asking and others is where is there's land available? And yes, the building permits and so forth, the centralizing everything would go a long way. But municipalities alone can't do it. And that's why I think getting those stakeholders together would make a lot of sense. Only because if you're going to drive affordability into housing, I mean, go to Home Hardware and buy a 2x4, and they don't care if you're a nonprofit group or a business itself. You're going to pay the same price, and so forth. So there has to be mechanisms in place, whether it's land assembly. Is that going to be in the public hands in order for us to keep driving the costs down? And the only way you can do that is putting all the people in the room. And also to know what is selling at any given time. Because right now I've talked to developers that say condominiums are not selling at all. And but semi-detached and townhomes is a hot commodity. And so how do you do that, to hit the right button at the right time and so forth. So I think your suggestion of getting kind of a task force or a committee with all the stakeholders, I think I think could be a driving force and for the municipality in order for us to do that. And I think I just want to extend my thanks to you, Mr. Hillman, and your department, and also to Mr. Solani on this report, because I think it's an eye opener for us. And I think it should be an eye opener to the government as well, is because if it's status quo for the municipality, we're going to develop X. If we put a proper housing strategy, and I think that's what we're trying to do, a housing strategy in place, we can, it looked like 114% increase in terms of the housing. Well, you know what? That's the direction that we should be going, and so forth. So that part of the report really gives me, I guess you could say hope that we can start doing the right thing and then having the right mix of houses. The only way we're going to do that is to put put the people in the room and have that discussion. So I do believe that this report should be not only received now, but I'm looking anxiously in August for the finalized report when it goes to the government. And I hope everybody, we give our local MP who has a responsibility, a phone call here and say, look, we agree with your government's strategy, but we need your help to make this happen. And with that, I think we can create I think your numbers are conservative. I really believe your numbers are conservative under this plan. I think we can do much better. And with the right the right folks pushing the right buttons. So not much of a question, just more of a, comments at this stage here. And I'll turn the floor to members of council as well if they do have some questions or comments. But I really, really like this report, and looking forward to lobby on behalf of our community to make sure that the government gives us our just due. Councillor Higginson.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I want to echo those comments. Council Mayor Call, that we authorized members of council to go to a conference recently for Congress for New Urbanism. And I attended, and these were many of the principles that have been in place in that organization. I'm proud to see that we're implementing those. And I'm proud to see that we're thinking about them in a way that is both responsive to current community need and as we grow. So I appreciate what's in here and the thoughtful incentives and initiatives that we've put forward. Couple questions I had on some of the initiatives. There was a mention in here about eliminating parking minimums and those sorts of things. And my assumption is that this plan, should it be approved by council and able to be used for the Housing Accelerator Fund, how do we see this plan interacting with transportation plans and transit plans and our active transportation plans moving forward? Do we see this as a guiding document for those as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll certainly start, and if Larry wants to add anything, he's welcome to. What this will do, I think, is number one, place the emphasis of the need for housing on the radar, and in preparing any number of other policy documents, guiding documents, active transportation plans, and so on. This will be an informative strategic initiative that has to have any number of initiatives associated with it. Hence, in this case, we currently have 10. It could be that in 5 years, there's 12, or there could be 10 different ones, because we've made headway on all of these, which we will. That's the expectation. On the parking, for the example that you gave, what we're anticipating is it's very focused at this point, and the funding requires us to be very focused on our initiatives. There are outcomes expected, and our funding will be affected by our ability and the speed at which we can make these initiatives happen. So I will use that as an example where we may look at a work program once we get our application in. And the application itself really is going to become our work program. It's going to, Larry and I have the goal that if you can complete an initiative within the first year of the program, you get 5 points. If it's the second year, you only get 3 points. So the game here is that we want 5 points. So I suspect, will be looking at the initiatives are put into the program. We will seek funding, for example, to hire perhaps a consultant to assist with the review of our parking provisions and bring forward a recommendation. And the funding will then demonstrate, it'll offset municipal costs. And it will allow us to bring that forward quickly and put it into place. And then what we have to try and do is identify how many units do you think we would generate by doing that type of thing, without drilling into that too far. The active transportation is a very good point. It will be an issue flowing from this plan, but it won't be one of the initiatives currently in this plan. Not to say it couldn't be at a future date, but this, we feel, is about all that we as an organization can handle at this point, with good returns.
I appreciate that, and the illustration of that was excellent. So thanks for wrapping my mind around that. And to that point, and something that that the mayor just brought up about Initiative 10, I also note that in the report it's referred to as what we see as the perfect storm right now of high interest rates and the low availability of skilled trades and workers in housing. And I'm wondering if one of the outcomes of the Initiative 10, or one of the perhaps something we could integrate into initiative 10 is thinking about our local educational institutions and how we build research and development and in some of those things, and how we can incentivize our own local graduates to train here, stay here, and really be thinking about, or we're not going to be the only municipality locally who's looking at stuff like this. And we certainly have all the data that we need to know that these are workers that we need here, and this is we don't want the brain drain of those things to be leaving, and we want there to be more incentive for programs like that. And so I'm wondering if that's maybe a one of the stakeholders that we're considering, or whether that's maybe an offshoot from that initiative.
This is interesting. I think it slides right into your segue.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we recently had a tour of St. Anne's Annex. They're not calling it that. They're calling it something to do with skilled trades on Arbor Street here in town. And it's amazing what they're doing on the inside of that building to retrofit it for skilled trades. So certainly, I think to your point, in terms of the advisory panel, having a representative from that school board on the advisory panel to help with placement of internships and applying those skills as those graduates are taking their programming there. They get college credit as well as their high school credit for completing the program. It's masonry, it's carpentry, it's plumbing, it's HVAC and electricity. So really a builder's dream in terms of having trained young people coming forward out of that program who live locally. And to your point, hopefully we can capture them and keep them in the community. So I think that's one way to slide that into Initiative 10.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, just briefly to add to that, we view this task force to really be a platform for advocacy. And one of the things we learned in going through this process was once you start talking to the individual parts of this housing construction system that we have, be it the private or the public sector, they very infrequently are in the room together. To the mayor's point, you have to bring people together, and it's just communicating alone is how you can identify opportunities. So here's a great example of something that's happening in the town. Who's aware of it? How do we advocate for it? Flip side to that is we can't find qualified building inspectors as municipalities in Ontario. And how can a task force identify that issue, advocate for it, and bring recommendations up to council to have advocacy? So I think it's the potential is quite broad in terms of what the task force can do, and certainly that one. And to the CAO's point, that can be used as an example of how we can better communicate out what the opportunities are to our residents.
That's great. I always think that there's something that we can use to our advantage in one of the biggest small towns that we live in. Everybody's kind of connected to everybody, and I appreciate that coming from the school board that we have kind of a bit of a microcosm of pushing towards post-secondary education, and the trades really could use a major push even from our K-12 sector. So knowing that that's happening right in our backyard is very exciting to kind of be able to highlight and to use that expertise that they have there. So thank you. I also would like to note that we don't get into deep demographics in this sort of draft, and I did a bit of a dive a couple months ago during the conference, and I did it again recently. And what's interesting to me is some of the ways that the data from this report, which I appreciate Mr. Solani having that that in there, that solo home owners or solo people are the second highest growing demographic in Canada, second only to roommates. So I think to the slide about how we've built up until now and what we are building from now and moving forward really has to take into account the realities of what people are going to want, what they can afford, and how they can position themselves as growing in this community when those demographics are changing, and when that reflection can be really anticipated with great initiatives like this and great data that we have to support it, and a great team. So I'm excited to see this, and excited to kind of dig into it as we get further from the draft, but thanks. I'm really impressed.
Jobin, and then
Okay, thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Higginson's comments. I was going to start with the active transportation, but all that's been touched upon. So I'm going to get a couple of things. So all this development and change is exciting, but it's also very scary. I feel like we maybe have to engage our community a little bit better with maybe some PICs. I mean, we're just going through some growth and change with our infrastructure and detouring. And people are having a hard time grasping a like the road is blocked. There is a detour here. Semi trucks should not go through here. Cars should not speed through here. So when we're going to talk about all this growth and change, we're talking about increase in traffic and more cars on the road. And part of the in the draft is remove parking for development. I find that to be a scary statement, because we already are growing our downtown core and parking is an issue there. So maybe a parking garage, I don't know, but I don't see us not needing parking. We need more parking. And we need to really engage, I think, and have maybe a north public meeting at the arena and a south public meeting at the church or something where this is more talked about. I just feel like we need to change the culture of people's behavior around this growth, because we need it. Everyone knows about it. Things you talked about the funding, the different levels of government are talking about banking and European bank policies and things that are happening that we're reviewing and trying to do. But where's the discussion? You know, we're going to leave here tonight and maybe I'll post something on social media briefly and then no one's going to care. I mean, I get more likes on a kid's graduation photo than a town decision that's pretty important. So I think that we need to somehow engage, because all this change and growth, people already can't really handle and get their head around some things. So I don't know what that means for us or how we can go about it. Maybe we just should talk about it more when we have meetings, bring it up. I don't know, but that's the scary part for me is people dealing and managing their way, navigating through the changes, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jobin. Excellent points, and I totally agree with you. And I think that's something that this advisory panel that is contemplated through initiative number 10 should take under advisement, is not only talking amongst themselves and making those connections, but engaging with the community to help bring them along.
Through your worship, to Brian and team, thank you for putting the time and effort into completing this in the short amount of time that you've had. And I do think to a lot of the points that we've had, it will have a huge impact for us, for the community, short term and long term. On the heels of what Councillor Jobin said, I'm looking at a couple of these initiatives, and initiative 1 jumps out to me as of initiative 3. My question specifically for those, more initiative 1 is in implementing these, I'm assuming it will follow the existing open house, zoning bylaw amendment, public input, for all of that, because, I look at this, and if we're allowing these as of right, when one pops up next door and someone says, look, I was never told, no one asked me, I can see the potential for a little bit of conflict there. And also with the ARU piece, I think there's a huge opportunity for us within the ARUs for placement and growth within the community. And I don't know if, because we've always talked sort of a developer open house or bringing developers in and, engaging with them. I think our engagement with the development community is going to be very important here, but, specifically with the ARUs, having an open house and just letting the community know, this is what's available and it's a tool. And, but I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but I think the engagement piece is going to be huge, just to educate, the community on what some of these changes are, because there's a few of them that could have, big impact. And some of them are very centralized in those initiatives. But I guess to my first question, with those initiatives and rezoning, that'll just follow the, traditional process. And then I think there'll be a piece of education that should follow from the changes that we've made. But if you could just touch on that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. And again, Larry, if there's anything you want to add, do so. Just give me a minute though. Well, you covered off a number of initiatives there actually. And I think that speaks to, there is a mapping out of how this is going to move forward. Initiative number one is something that what we see happening is through the new zoning bylaw that's currently being prepared, actually tasking our current consultant to vigorously evaluate that option and bring forward a regulatory environment that would see council being placed in a position to consider it. Any new zoning bylaw or changes are subject to public meetings and input. But and just to add to that, I think something that we want to really start doing, and it is referenced through the ARUs coming up with a better methodology of making it easier for people to understand, how do I convert my house? Because I think to Councillor Higginson's comment earlier, we're in a different environment now, and there's sort of there's a shift that's happening in society where we need to adapt to a different form of housing and a different expectation from our community. What was once a garage that had 2 cars, maybe a garage with 1 car and actually 1 livable unit that is completely affordable and allows someone to continue to live in our community who uses the transit system. So I think, everything you said is bundled into these initiatives, although they're separate and distinct, many are tied together, and they are very complex issues, and they are intending to try and react to the state of affairs that we're in right now, which is a housing crisis. There's been a declaration of a climate emergency. And I think it's safe to say that we as a community and we as a country are facing a housing crisis. And some of the initiatives are bold. And part of it is bringing our community along on this journey. And I think once everybody starts to recognize through our own processes of advocacy, communicating, listening, we are we're a community that's aging together and our needs are changing together. So, hopefully that helps answer that. I sort of equally, I took your rambling moments and just did my own. And Larry, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Thank you, Brian. Through you, through Mayor McNamara, just a couple of comments. I'm pleased to hear, the commentary and the questions. It's, they're all very good and very helpful. And I think one of the chords that I'm hearing come across, we've tried to reflect in the plan and in goal number 5, this notion of the importance of engaging, collaborating, and educating. And I can't overstate that, because I mean, as Brian indicated, some of these are bold moves and some of these are not something that in a community such as Tecumseh, because the housing and the demographic characteristics were different in the past, may not necessarily be accustomed to. But going forward, it's something that if we use that housing advisory panel to its best of its abilities, you'll have other people that will be assisting. So it won't be just the heavy lifting being done by council or administrative staff. You'll have the community partners that will be helping to educate. You'll have, engagement that will take place here, will take place at a number of different levels across the board as some of these initiatives are moving forward. So the importance is, getting out there early and having people understand how this can be done in a way that is going to help the community and move the community forward. The notion of eliminating parking, both Brian and I have been in, doing planning for a long time. I don't want anyone to say the number of years, but we understand the importance of doing this in a way that is respectful of the community and takes into consideration all of the various factors. So I don't think any of us are suggesting that you're going to eliminate parking across the board or do anything that's going to cause, problems. The notion is there are some opportunities. If you take a look, in Tecumseh and you'll, take a look at various types of the year, there's a lot of asphalt that's sitting there unused. And it's only maybe one day of the year when, you get 75 or 100% utilization of some of these parking areas. But there are some areas where there's an acute parking problem right now, but there are some opportunities. And I think that's the sort of thing that that initiative is meant to drive home is let's take a look at those and, only move forward where it makes sense. And it helps to, bring more affordable or more housing that is actually going to meet the needs of the community today and in the next 5 years, but do it in a responsible way. So I'll stop rambling as well, but I think it's important to look at that in the context of engaging, collaborating, and educating.
I just want to add a few points as well, is that, probably in the last, I would say probably the last 2 years in particular, coming out of COVID, when housing prices went crazy and so forth, probably from across the spectrum demographics, I've heard the affordability issue, and we need more affordable housing. We need more for affordable housing and so forth. And I totally agree with that. And, you hear it. This is my kids both are working, they're making, 6 figures, and they can't afford a house. They can't even afford the rent, and so forth. So, so there has to be a huge shift, even on the size of homes that we're building. Why are we building 5,000 square foot homes when, we should be going back to what they did in the 50s, 1,000 square foot home and so forth. So that there's a big demand, for affordability. The other piece too that you have to change, we got to change. It's not a question of, we got to accept change because of a whole host of factors. Climate change is a factor. You hear it all along. The planet's on fire. It's either one is they're drowning and the other one, the planet's on fire. And so we have to change, how we do things and so forth. For certain. And I really believe when you look at the demographics of our community, compared to the average across the country, 35% of our residents are 55 and up. 25% are 65 and up. And that's going to continue to grow. And so the demand of those houses. So when you talk about parking and so forth, they might get down to 1 car. And they're going to want to be on the main street and want to be by, busing. They want to be, I hate to say it, close to the urgent care center and so forth. And so, so there's a huge shift. And the other thing too, listen, I'm listening to my grandson. He's 25 years old, graduate environmental science, and he works in Toronto. Got rid of his car. I don't need a car. I got transit. If I need something, I take the train or I fly and so forth. And a lot, like when you ask him, like, what is the future for you? What are you looking for? So, you know what? He's got a 500 square foot condominium with all the amenities right next to him. So I don't know what 10 years from now, what it's going, his thinking is going to be. But if you listen to them, it's all the 6,000 square foot home or the estate lot, that's not in the back of their minds because they know they can't afford it. Number one is affordability, small home, close to transit, transportation, and they like to travel. They like to see the world. And so, sometimes we have to take a step back and start listening, to the population. So to your point, Mayor or Deputy Mayor, I was going to call you, Councillor Houston, we need to communicate more and more with obviously our citizens. And so we have to have that ability. That's why that number 10 is important, because it's not just having the developers there or us and the developers making the decision and so forth, but it's having the folks in our community. And I think we should engage various groups young and old and everything in between, to be able to, to bring some of those ideas in terms of how our community needs to be developed, because things are changing. And the other thing to remember for the next, I forget how many years, but there's over 500,000 newcomers coming per year to our community. That equates to how many homes? 200,000 more homes. And if you do that over a 5-year period, that's 1 million homes just for them. Forget about what we need as a community. And so, and what are their needs? If you've been to Europe, they don't have the 6,000 square foot homes and so forth. So I think, all in all, this is going to be an eye opener for all of us. A big eye opener for all of us. And I know change is hard for a lot of folks. I hear it. They tell you about affordable homes. They talk about, parking issues and so forth. Talk about, it takes me an extra 5 minutes to get home, but God forbid if I take a bus or, or to work and so forth. So there's a lot of things we need to do. And I think to your point, Councillor Houston, is that communication is going to be a key tool. And I think both Councillor Jobin has said, we've got to have that conversation. And I think this type of report actually now really delves into that. And you've spoken to people, you've spoken to them. That's what this report's all about. And a lot of that is information that's flowing from, the builders, the developers and many others. So, like I said, August is going to be a good month. I think when you bring that, and we're going to have certainly a lot of discussions. And the other thing about that we have to keep in mind as well is that not just the housing of the newcomers that are coming as well, is do we have the amenities in town to take care of the population that are here and coming? Those are the other components, I think, that we need to keep that in the back of our minds. Any further questions or comments? Can I have a motion to receive the report? Councillor Higginson, Councillor Jobin, on the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Once again, thank you, Larry, and enjoy your time in British Columbia. I was there about 3 weeks ago or so, and had a wonderful time out there. And stay safe, stay away from Kamloops right now. I hope you're not too close to them. But thank you again for this, and also to Mr. Hillman, your department, the building department. I see our CBO here as well. So thank you for this report.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Communication items, we have one item, the Violence Against Women Coordinating Committee of Windsor Essex declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic. And the recommendation, correspondence dated July 12th. Coordinating Committee of Windsor Essex, a cross-sectional committee comprised of community-based organizations that work together to provide coordinated response for women experiencing violence and their children, seeking support in declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic in Windsor Essex County be received and supported, and that the town of Tecumseh Council recognize the issues of violence against women and children in Windsor Essex as serious as the health and wellness of local families, and further that the town of Tecumseh hereby declares intimate partner violence as an epidemic and advocates for the systemic change that needs to occur in all of our communities to best protect those at risk. And furthermore, that this resolution be forwarded to the Premier, local members of provincial parliament, and the Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunity in support of provincial legislation to address family violence, and request that intimate partner violence by formally declared an epidemic in Ontario. What say ye? Move by Councillor Higginson, supported Councillor Jobin. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. No committee minutes to report. And so we'll go to reports. And first is our Chief Administrative Officer and People Culture. And it's the 2023-2026 strategic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're pleased to bring you the completed product this evening for your approval. You have a copy of it on your desks. It's also attached to the electronic version of the report. This will be printed on, print grade quality, but we wanted to print it out just to show you what the jacket would look like and its contents. A very efficient plan. Can be printed on one page, summarizes all of our deliberations on the vision, the mission, the values, and then the three strategic priorities with their sub goals under each of those. So we are pleased to present this evening and look for council's approval of the final document. And then, of course, we've got some ancillary recommendations. Go back to the recommendations, please, Christina. That not only be received, but that it be adopted, and further that we be directed to incorporate the strategic priorities into our work plans and action plans as part of the corporation's annual work planning and budgeting. And further that the progress on the strategic priorities be reported out annually over the term of the plan. So special thanks once again goes to Christina Ebert, who's been with me all along on this journey, and couldn't have done it without her. And of course, Janice Forsyth, our consultant, and all of you for participating wholeheartedly in this process. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions or comments on the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Houston and supported by Councillor Dorner. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, next, CAO and Peoples and Culture 2023-03, the council remuneration review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased today to report or to bring forward the electronic monitoring policy. So in April of 2022, the government passed Bill 88, which was the Working for Workers Act, and it amended the Employment Standards Act and Occupational Health and Safety Act. And as such, it required that employers that had more than 25 employees had a written policy on electronic monitoring in place. The town is committed to meeting its requirements under ESA, and as such has developed the electronic monitoring policy. So the policy contained in your package, it contains the methods in which we monitor employees, the frequency and method of data collection. And I will note too that ESA, the requirements do not establish the right for employees not to be monitored, just establishes that we need to notify them. So once this written policy has been adopted, it will be distributed to all employees within 30 days, and then it'll be included in our new hires onboarding packages. So the recommendation tonight is that it be the electronic monitoring policy be received and the electronic monitoring policy be approved. Thank you.
All right,
Any
thank you very much.
questions?
Questions? Comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, through you. Will you be meeting individually with counselors throughout the process?
It wasn't planned to meet with counselors, but I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any specific questions. I know the plan is to be sending it out, and I believe through counselors it will come out through the CAO's office.
Okay. All right. Any further questions or comments? On the report, all in favor? Oh, got to move it first, sorry. Councillor Higginson and Councillor Dorner. No further questions, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. All right, sorry about the mix up. I went too quick. Item C, CAO, and again, People's and Culture 23-03, Council Remuneration Review. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the second report I'm pleased to bring forward tonight is the council remuneration review. So for some background, so under the Municipal Act, SO 2011, Chapter 25. So Section 283 provides authority of council of a municipality to provide payment or remuneration to the members of council, and as such, remuneration may be determined in any manner that council considers advisable. So the town enacted bylaw number 2006-84 in November 2006 and has amended the Schedule A in subsequent terms of council to reflect the recommendations arising from the remuneration reports associated with that term. So the current term of council remuneration was scheduled to be completed in early 2023 to coincide with the new term of council, but it was delayed to the vacancy in the director position I'm now fulfilling. So with the vacancy filled by myself, we are ready to get started. So it is recommended that we undertake the council remuneration review in conjunction with a compensation consultant. This consultant has previously provided these compensation market survey services to the town. So the market study will be comprised of 3 steps, which would be project initiation and collection of market data, analysis and observation and draft report, and then the preparation of a final report, which will be brought to council. So I do want to note in prior remuneration reviews in previous terms, council had included a community advisory committee as part of the process. However, that practice is not widely used currently for several reasons, including cost effectiveness, time commitments, the frequency of reviews, and the ability now to access and utilize several compensation databases that are provided. So as such, I'm requesting that report council remuneration be received and that council approves the Director of People of Culture's recommendation to proceed with the council remuneration review, and that further that upon receipt and approval of the final summary report by council, that bylaw number 2006-84 and its Schedule A be presented to council for amendment so as to reflect the recommended process for and final recommendations arising from the council remuneration review. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
This is the one I was meaning to ask about. And do you plan on meeting with councilors individually throughout the process?
That's it. So through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, learning this process. That's a good question. I don't actually have the answer to that. In the past, I believe there was a community advisory committee and different members of council would be to participate. But I do believe what is going to happen is once we have a draft report and then there'll be a preparation of final report, that's when there'll be some input. But I don't know that individual members will be met with because this is really a collection of market data. And then it's very much a statistical analysis that goes on. Independent. All right.
Okay. Questions on the report? Move Councillor Houston, Councillor Dorner on the motion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Community and Recreation Services. It's the CRS 2023-16 5-year capital works update. Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. It's my pleasure this evening to bring you an update in terms of the capital project work plans for my department. As stated in the report, in reviewing the capital project plans which have been approved and adopted by council through the capital budget process, we've identified 82 projects distributed according to the report here, 25 projects in parks, 18 in the arena, 13 in pools, and 26 in municipal buildings over the course of the next 5 years. 7 of those projects in municipal buildings include significant recreation amenities and facilities in parks. So in other words, there's a significant overlap and intersection between work that's being planned across the various aspects of my department. When I started to look at, and our team started to review and do an analysis of the implementation requirements, we made a determination to maximize opportunities for integration across the work, not only within our department, but also to maximize potential opportunities for integration with works that are planned and scheduled with PWES, particularly when it comes to servicing types of requirements that might be happening either within or adjacent to a park site. So in other words, the timing and scheduling of the implementation of these projects, we need to take a bit of a step back to ensure that we weren't going to be tripping over one another, and optimizing our own ability to be effective and efficient with not only the dollars, but also to avoid conflicts with community events, coordinate these construction activities over the period of the 5 years so that not every park that's identified would be under construction at every given point in time over the next 5 years. So how might we minimize and focus the attention of these projects and consolidate our efforts and our energies so that we would be working in one park for 1 year and then move on to another park in another year, particularly those parks that we've identified in the report that have significant or a number of amenities that have been approved to be placed in those parks over the course of the 5-year period of time. We also know that taking this kind of an approach to site planning will also accelerate the tendering process, because many of the site decisions, i.e. where might a particular amenity be located, that work will have already been done through this implementation planning process. Those decisions will have already been made. So when we say it's time to greenlight a park in XYZ park, we'd be able to do that with the full understanding of the site plan, not only the surface plan, but the servicing plan, and understand how to coordinate and lay out a project schedule accordingly. So in order to provide those capital project implementation planning site plans and development, we've engaged Ron Cowdice Landscape Architects for the remainder of 2023. This is a single source contract of up to $50,000 for the duration of the year, to be funded through the council approved allocation of $150,000 for project management in the park's 5-year capital works plan. Just a note on Mr. Cowdice, we're quite fortunate to actually have access to he and his team. He is himself a recognized and well-acknowledged landscape architect, done many, many master plans for parks and cities all throughout southwestern Ontario. He's currently a professor of landscape design, horticulture, and integrated land planning technologies at Fanshawe College and has been employed as such since 1980. He's a certified practiced landscape architect in both Canada and Michigan. He's currently actually obtaining his PhD from the University of Calgary, and continues to advance his own knowledge and his own practice in his career. Recently, we engaged Mr. Cowdice's team to develop a concept design for Lakewood Park South for the different amenities that are planned there, and also has been engaged in the Maidstone Recreation Center washroom project. When we started to look at project by project engagement versus simply providing him with a contract to take a look at 9 significant projects, we realized it would be a much more cost-effective and efficient way for us to use his time and our budget. So the scope of work as identified in the capital project plan includes a review of the existing site and conditions, drone surveys, base information, including grading, drainage, servicing for each site is required. Again, this kind of information won't be done episodically per amenity per park, but rather through site plans for all of these parks. Preparation of conceptual designs and implementation plans, as you can see, to talk about the different characteristics that we might want for the amenities, including vandal-proof characteristics, climate-resistant materials, for example, and construction estimates to actually help us with better capital budget planning on an annual basis. As you all know, costs have been increasing year over year, and this opportunity to do this kind of plan hopefully would get us some updated capital construction costs now. So we're suggesting 9 projects be part of this process. All of these projects have amenities and budget that have already been approved by council in the reports stated in this report. All of these are significant. All of them have multiple amenities that were planned to be constructed in each of these parks. So it makes sense to us to actually do them all at once. So I'll just list these out. You can see them in the report. The town campus, the idea of a wellness hub or the triple gym, we're going to talk about, I think, coming up. But this is something that we continue to work on and work towards obtaining funding for. That said, there are a number of other amenity improvements that we need to make to that site. Maidstone Rec Center, Washrooms, the design for those washrooms have already been completed. As you know, there's a grant that we're required to build that. It'll be built in time for that grant. But there's also a plan here for pickleball courts and pathway connections and facility renovations. Lakewood Park South, we're all excited to integrate a new washroom with an all ages water feature and a picnic shelter. How might we best design that site so that it actually includes both a great surface design as well as a servicing plan? Southfield Park, this is a site that has a lot of amenities planned for it. It does require site servicing, and we're going to need to get that work done in a coordinated fashion so that all of these amenities can actually, in fact, be built on the surface. McAuliffe Park, we've been having conversations around McAuliffe Park around what might its potential look like due to the existing site. That site is heavily utilized, as we know, and well loved by that community, and also has intersections with the Tecumseh Hamlet secondary plan. Lacoste Park. I can't tell you how excited I am for opening day at the Bert Lacoste Baseball Stadium next summer. This is going to be an absolute fantastic jewel in our crown in our park system. And we know that we can actually provide additional enhancements by timing the resurfacing of the parking lot and the timing of the landscaping plan in order to really make sure that that park is done for opening day for that national baseball championship that we're hosting next summer. Lesueur South, existing soccer campus, might we be able to expand and extend that with partnerships and collaborations? Chippewa Park has been identified. We want to improve access to that site. We need to also have a beach erosion plan in place. And quite honestly, when we look at the opportunity for L'Esperance Road, we're really building a linear park in addition to that trail that starts at Chippewa Park and goes all the way up to Tecumseh Road and L'Esperance Road. So how might we think about that and plan that together? And lastly, Rushville Park. We know that there's a toddler playground playset going in there soon. But we also know that that site is prime for different types of amenities. What might they be and how might they be planned in advance so that we can actually get to building and constructing those amenities sooner as opposed to later. So that really is the overall intention. We are therefore requesting capital project deferrals so that we can do this site planning properly over the next 4 to 5 months. And you can see in the report what we're requesting. So I'll move to the recommendations and then open for questions. So right now we're suggesting that this report be received, that changes to the implementation of the 5-year capital works plan be approved, and further that $4,260,000 in the 2023 CRS capital projects be deferred as follows. Southfield Multi-Use Court, $110,000 from the Trails Life Cycle Reserve. Southfield Perimeter Trail, $150,000 from the Parks Life Cycle Reserve. Lakewood Washroom and Splash Pad, $2 million, $1.5 million from the Infrastructure Reserve and $500,000 from the Parks Life Cycle Reserve. Lesueur Soccer Fields Phase 1, $2 million, with $1 million from the Infrastructure Reserve and $1 million from the French Catholic School Board. So with that, I open it up to any questions.
Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not so much a question, but a comment. Thank you very much for the report. Very well written. I don't have any questions just because there was so much great information in here that you clarified any question that I did have. I will just say thank you for including Rushville Park because I have had quite a few inquiries about that park. I think it's a gem in Ward 4. And it's got a ton of potential.
Mhm.
So I am very interested to see what the architect may come back with of what we can do to maximize, that potential for the residents there. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Councilor Higginson.
Thank you very much. And through you, I will just echo Councillor Houston's comments on the report. I appreciate it. I also appreciate that harken back, it's very fitting that we've passed this today, that we talked a lot about in those discussions about overlapping some of the things that we do, both for efficiency and for the ability for people to be able to use amenities that they are used to using in an effective way that actually balances with their life. And to that point, and to Councillor Houston's point about communication, as it's been done so well in here, my hope is that we'll be able to communicate this out, because this may come as a disappointment to some people who are looking forward to some of these things happening in a timeline that now is shifted a little bit. And so my hope is that we can communicate these changes out in a way that is reminiscent of what we've seen here, as a way of giving them some confidence that they will be done. They will be done using your tax dollars in a very effective way. Sustainable plans for all the 5 wards in our system, and a way for everybody to be able to continue to use the parks and their amenities in the way that they love.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Higginson, through you, Mr. Mayor. The intention here is for conceptual design, site plan designs to actually be brought forward to council as part of the capital budget process. So you would be able to see what those designs look like. And we would be then presenting you with a modified schedule for implementation. So, my hope is that once we have those conversations here, that yes, we would then be able to share that broader schedule and those plans with the community on our own website and social media, and with any user groups. We want to make sure that the plans are shared with folks who are using those sites and using those parks in particular. And we really look forward to that. I can tell you that our conversations as a team with Mr. Cowdice have been extremely exciting. This morning we actually had a conversation about Lakewood Park South, and I was pretty jazzed, and I think you're really going to love it. So it's I think you'll be happily, I think, pleased and surprised by some of the ideas that we're bringing forward. So I'm excited.
I like a cliffhanger. Thank you for that.
Just gonna say.
You brought up a point that I didn't think about, that I was only thinking about kind of the end game of how do we communicate that out. But I have been having discussions with user groups and things like that that are leading into this, and what have those conversations been like, or what are you anticipating with some of those?
Yeah, so thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Really, it was incumbent upon us to have this conversation with you first, and then as part of rolling through the site plan development process, as we're engaging on a park by park or site by site basis, we'll be reaching out to user groups who do utilize those particular sites, over the course of the next several months. Thank you.
Wow, I mean, that's a lot of great, add-ons to the parks, that's for sure. And so basically, it's just a kind of a realignment that we're trying to do here. And I mean, I certainly understand, like, if you're especially Southfield, Lakewood Park, splash pad, you got water, and other amenities have to be put in there. Hopefully that, they're in that time span, because I know there are expectations. I mean, as you know, some of the items have been on the books for close to 10 years. Folks are saying, I'll believe it when I see it, now. And I hate that when I hear that, certainly in that regard. So I think it's an efficient way, to get things done. And I know in terms of the artificial turf piece and that, you're looking into maybe other avenues or opportunities too, where the end result will be just as good, but at a cost savings, which we can utilize it certainly in other areas. Lacoste Park, you're absolutely right. That diamond in what's happening, with the dugouts and the plaza and the parking lots and so forth, that's going to be the envy of Southwestern Ontario baseball. There's no doubt. I know I've heard comments before, teams that come into the region love playing in Lacoste Park. We've heard it from our partners at St. Clair, and the players love playing there. And I guess tongue in cheek, there's going to be some out of Toronto and other areas are going to hate us even more, because they always say that if you're to win the Canadian championships, you got to go through Tecumseh. And You know, the old saying, if you build it, they will come. And we've got a tremendous baseball program. And I know Jay Miguel, who's the president of Tecumseh Thunder, have done an extraordinary job over the years in getting that part to what it is or what it was. And the town now is taking it to well, I'd say a notch. They're taking it to the next level. And it's going to be beautiful. And all the others, and it's well spread out, every park. And for most people in the audience that don't understand, I think we got 40 plus parks in the system, small ones, medium-sized ones, and certainly big ones. And every area in the community is going to experience some significant opportunities here. So thank you for, I guess, rearranging the banquet table.
And just to you, Mr. Mayor, on the issue of time, thank you. I do know that having these site plans and some of these decisions made in advance now, in terms of amenity characteristics, placements of amenities, making sure that everything is in place, that does allow us to actually expedite the projects. So, you know, from a timing perspective, this is a 5-year capital plan. The intention is to continue to stick to the plan. So you're right, in terms of the ordering might be different, but when Southfield is done, it will be all done.
No, totally agree. Instead of piecemealing things, and you know, you hate to wrap around, you know, construction fencing, you know, and say, oh, you can't use the park now for 2 months, and then next year you wrap it around another piece and say, oh, sorry, for the next 2 months you can't use the park. Let's wrap it in 4 months and say, yeah, we're going to do the whole thing, and then it's done. No, I think organizing this and working with Public Works, I think makes a whole lot of sense. And at the end of the day, it's going to save taxpayers money, and they're going to end up with beautiful facilities.
Thank
All right, on the report, move. Councillor Houston moves. Councillor Dorner supports. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you very much for the report. I don't know why I keep losing it. Yeah, Public Works, my favorite subject. Yeah, I know I got it here. Yeah, I've got it. Took a little while, but here we are. All right, Public Works Engineering Services, PWES 23. 53 Gwain Drain Tender Award, and I'll let you bring that report forward, Mr. Bartnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try to keep these short and sweet tonight. So
Doesn't matter. It's still spending money.
Yeah. So brief summary, we did have 4 tender submissions received on June 29th. The lowest tender was below the engineer's construction estimate by about $33,000. The recommendations within the report tonight, that the tender for the Gwen Drain in the amount of $393,120 excluding HST be awarded to Mark G Contracting Inc. And that bylaw 2023-84 be given first, second, third, and final reading to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement satisfactory and form to the town solicitor with Mark G Contracting Inc. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments? If not, moved by Councillor Higginson, supported by Councillor Jobin. No further questions. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, you're still on, Mr. Bartnick. You got the Monte Branch Drain Tender Award. Oh, then go ahead. Okay. Yeah, B comes before C. I get it. PWES, the Antea Drain Tender Award.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for the Antea Drain, we did have 6 tender submissions that we received on June 29th. The lowest tender is above the engineer's construction estimate by about $15,000. The recommendations within the report this evening are that the tender for the Antea Drain in the amount of $76,814 excluding HST be awarded to Murray Mills Excavating and Trucking Limited. and that bylaw 2023-82 be given first, second, third, and final reading to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement satisfactory in form to the town solicitor with Murray Mills Excavating. If there's
All right,
any
thank you.
questions?
Questions? No questions? Moved by Councillor Houston, supported by Councillor Higginson. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so the Monte Branch Drain Tender Award, Mr. Bartnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. The town did receive 6 tender submissions on June 29th. The lowest tender is above the engineer's construction estimate by about $23,000. The recommendations contained within the report that the tender for the De Monte Branch Drain in the amount of $198,687, excluding HST, be awarded to Mark G Contracting, and that bylaw 2023-83 be given first, second, third, and final reading to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement satisfactory in form to the town solicitor with Mark G Contracting.
Questions or comments? Hearing none. Moved by Councillor Houston, supported by Councillor Dorner. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Public Works, the West Town Line Mooney Creek Drain and the emergency replacement of residential access bridge 5285 County Road 19. Mr. Bartnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I begin with the summary, I do want to acknowledge Mr. Mark Hernandez from Dillon Consulting is here today in the audience. He is the engineer who has been appointed through the Drainage Act to work on this project. And he's here to answer any questions that may come up at the end of the summary. The recommendations contained within this report is that the report PWS 2023-56 be received. So in summary, so Dillon Consulting was appointed to review the West Town Line and Mooney Creek Drain in July of 2015. This request came from a property owner who had a bridge access that was failing at that time. So while drafting a drainage report specific to that one in the first property, a second property owner came forward, the owner at 5285 County Road 19. They contacted the town and identified that their access bridge was failing. Dillon inspected the bridge and found the structure to be in extremely poor condition with severe corrosion and section loss through the original steel girders. A steel plate was installed on the west side of the deck as a temporary repair, and signage for no truck traffic has been posted at the entrance. So administration has had ongoing discussions with Dillon Consulting, the County of Essex, and the landowner of 5285 County Road 19. They've been provided updates on the condition of the bridge, and they're very anxious to have it replaced as soon as possible due to the restricted access to their property. Administration also had a number of discussions with OMAFRA, and they did grant the town an emergency designation on the condition that the bridge replacement be made under the supervision of a drainage engineer from Dillon Consulting. So through this process, Dillon has reviewed 3 different options and is recommending an entirely new access bridge to be built on the north side of the existing bridge, and then one that's complete to decommission the existing bridge and remove it. There's some very challenging regulatory timeline issues for when works can actually take place on this bridge. We are contending with the DFO Fisheries Act, where no in-water work can commence between March 15th and July 15th. We have the MECP Endangered Species Act related to barn swallows for no work to commence between April 1st and August 31st. We also are dealing with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, where the work site has to be isolated and fish salvage to commence. And beyond the regulatory timeline challenges, and we also have the timeline challenges of when the actual asphalt plants are open. And we see that they're typically closed anywhere between November, December of any given year to about April or May the following year. So right now, the access bridge to 5285 County Road 19 is currently out for tender, and it is anticipated administration will bring a report back to council for the tender results at either the August 8th or the September 12th RCM. It is proposed to have the tender and construction process, as well as the Drainage Act process, to run concurrent, so that the landowners do not have to wait until October 2024 for full access to be restored to their property. The costs and assessments are estimated at this time and that are contained within this report. They will be finalized within the drainage report and brought to council for their consideration at a future public council meeting. The bridge cost estimate is roughly $850,000, and the assessments for the landowner is in the range of $75,000. The County of Essex assessment is in the range of $345,000, and then the upstream landowners would be assessed roughly about $430,000 for that bridge itself. That concludes my presentation. If there's any questions or concerns, I'd be happy to answer them, and Mr. Hernandez is here as well.
All right, thank you very much. How close or how confident you are that that's going to be the bid, or because every one of them has been, 10, 15, 20%, above estimate.
Yeah,
And that, because that's a huge ticket item, and I'm, the upstream landowners, are they aware of how large an assessment that they're going to be facing?
Through your worship, so a few questions there. We are cognizant of the fact that the tenders could come in higher than anticipated. We've kind of played out a few different scenarios that, if the bid is within the engineer's estimate, that we would bring a report back to council with recommendation. If it is higher, if we see that there's a lack of interest from the contractors, we'll have to reassess and perhaps reject the tenders, re-tender in the fall for construction in 2024. That's, it's something we want to be cognizant of, especially being a drainage project and having those costs borne by the landowners within the watershed themselves. We have had discussions with the owner and the County of Essex on the scope and scale and the assessments related to the bridge. We have not had those types of discussions with the upstream landowners. The West Town Line and Mooney Creek Drain is a large watershed. We figure that the assessments would be a lot smaller on those individual properties upstream. And I think through our discussions and consultation with OMAFRA, and this being kind of an emergency situation, their recommendation was to proceed forward with construction and concurrently completing the Section 78 report under the Drainage Act and proceed with that process.
Okay, yeah, obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a few visitors once that's declared.
One more tidbit of information when I was speaking to Mr. Hernandez earlier today. So council is aware that every year we bring forward, or every other year, every 2 years, we bring forward a bridge need study. And it's a condition assessment on all the town's bridges that are greater than 3 meter span. I believe we have 16, 2 of them are pedestrian bridges. So we have roughly about 14 vehicular bridges. So just to give you kind of a scale of this access bridge, this one does have a span of over 8 meters. So it is quite large. It's not your typical culvert or access bridge that you would see on kind of the smaller municipal drains that we see.
And then I would imagine it must be in real bad shape.
Yes. I believe it's being inspected monthly by Dillon Structural Engineer, just to ensure that they're tracking the deterioration and make a determination whether or not it's still safe to cross for those vehicles on that steel plate itself.
Yep, go ahead.
If I may, through you, to Mr. Bartnick's point, there's already been temporary repairs in the terms of a plate that's been added on the west side. And even after that, there are new holes opening up in the bridge. And so what we have is an issue where they can only at this point have passenger vehicles. They can be centered on the bridge rather only. And it's causing issues with respect to access because it's not just a residential parcel, it's also a commercial parcel. So there's issues with them running their business. There's issues with them having snow clearing because people don't want to put their trucks on it. They're having issues with getting their septic tank pumped and so on. And that's why the push to advance this process.
Okay. All right, so right now, you're looking for a motion to. Oh, question. Yeah, sorry. Question. Go ahead, Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I know I had asked this, Phil, this question earlier and Phil gave me a great answer, but because I've got the engineer here, I will ask the engineer. This is a bridge crossing for a private residence or a business. And my question to Phil was, why would upstream landowners or the county be assessed? And when I look at it, the property and the bridge for the property is being assessed less than 10% of what the estimate is. But I'm just curious because we've seen other crossings where they're being assessed the full cost of what this is. So I'm just curious of the methodology or why upstream is being assessed or why the county would be assessed for a bridge in this case.
Through you, Your Worship. That's an excellent question. There's a couple of components to that. The first is the reason that the county is being assessed a significant portion of the cost is related to what we call Section 26 costs or increased costs due to the presence of the roadway itself. There's significant measures in terms of traffic control and in terms of sheeting that we're going to have to do to protect the roadway. That is only because of the presence of the roadway, and those increased costs get assessed to the county as the road authority through that section of the Drainage Act. With respect to the proportions of how much the upstream landowners pay versus the landowner, in question, the rule of thumb typically when we're talking about culverts is new culverts are 100% to the landowner, and maintenance or replacement thereafter. The rule of thumb is typically 50-50 upstream landowners and the other 50% to the landowner in question. The general premise is the upstream landowners don't need the bridge, they need the drainage, and the landowner who's affected needs the access but doesn't need the upstream drainage. And so that's why they each share in the cost. What we do, and it takes some judgment on the engineer's part, is as the upstream watershed is larger and larger, and in this case it's quite large, as Mr. Bartnick mentioned, we're talking about an 8-meter span. It's quite large as far as drainage is concerned around here. We start to reduce the amount assessed to that particular landowner because it would be unfair. If we had somebody paying 50% of a pipe, for example, and then somebody else is paying 50% of a very large bridge where the watersheds are drastically different. So hopefully that helps to explain it.
It does, and thank you. The other question I have is, when I look on here on Google Maps, it looks like it's a single. Is it a single or a double wide line or lane? And my only question is, because of the cost of what it is, does the bridge need to be as big as it is, or can it be made any smaller at all? So that I don't know if you have that question now, but it's just a question.
Or even different material.
Yeah. So it's also a great question, and I think it's worth mentioning the extent to which we reviewed this. We provided Mr. Bartnick with a preliminary design report where we looked at this in great detail. We looked at whether or not the existing structure could be rehabilitated. We looked at various options for replacement. We reconsidered the size, the costs, and tried to consider not just the cost, but also maintaining access to the property, especially with the business and the things of those nature. So all of that analysis was completed and summarized in this preliminary design report that was submitted to administration. But the width, that's the span and the rise. The span is what we need because of the size of the drain. The rise is related to keeping the opening the same, which is to satisfy the Conservation Authority. And the width is not much wider than the bare minimum. So we've allowed for them to have access because they also have the commercial component. So it's not just the residential. If it were the residential, we might back it off, but it's actually not much larger than what we would have as a minimum.
Okay, yeah, thank you for asking that. That was my question, is that the size could you change material and so forth, but to me, about 8 meters, that sounds like it's, I know the the ditch there is fairly big, but 8 meters, that's 24 feet. So, but it is what it is. Any further questions? Then a motion received the report. Councillor Dorner, Councillor Higginson, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you very much. Technology and Client Services, TCS 2023-03, Policy 118, Video Surveillance Municipal Properties. Mr. Firth.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, members of council. So this policy comes from a spinoff of the policy presented earlier under electronic monitoring, because there is a component of that policy that council approved earlier that does deal with video surveillance. So video surveillance is nothing new here at the town. Even prior to amalgamation, we had the old black and white VHS recorders and grainy images back in the day. So over time, in the last 20 plus years, we have installed these systems at many of our facilities. And over that period, we have had some successful convictions. And not only convictions, but it does, as a rule, act as a deterrent to people that are planning on criminal activity on our properties. So as such, these systems that collect images that are considered town records, and so that MFIPA, the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, comes into play. And you'll find in the admin report that it does detail the application of that legislation relevant to video surveillance. It is also incumbent on the town as the authority overseeing the system to inform our patrons or our visitors to our facilities that they are being possibly videoed by the cameras. And as such, we're looking at adding some more signage to all the facilities that do have these cameras in place now. So the list of facilities is found in the admin report. And in addition to that, subsequent to collecting this information, the policy does outline the procedures on how to process requests for the data that comes from law enforcement agencies from time to time to help with their investigations. So again, something we've done in the past upon request, but this formalizes the process now going forward. So I think with that, the only financial implication here would be the signage, which has been graciously offered to be covered by our facilities and community and recreation services for about $1,000. The systems themselves are integrated with the TCS capital life cycle budget every year for new systems and replacement of old systems. So between 5 and 10 years, depending on the system and how it's working, we'll swap it out wholesale, in addition to adding to new sites, which we're doing so this year, again, identified in report. So we're looking for a motion that report TCS 2023-03 entitled Video Surveillance Municipal Properties Policy be received, and that the attachment 1 to the report, Video Surveillance Municipal Properties Policy number 118, be approved by council this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Firth. Questions or comments? Motion moved by Councillor Houston, and supported by Councillor Higginson. Just a question, Mr. Firth, on assessing areas where we've had most vandalism, caused, and so forth in the parks. Are we looking at strengthening visual in Lakewood Park as an example. I know we've had to have security there. The other is Green Acres Optimus Park itself. We've had, some vandalism in that area, quite extensive. And so are we looking to increase surveillance there?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so in those areas, it's usually a function of the infrastructure that's available to us. So for example, the incident at Lakewood Park, we do have a system at the pavilion, but nothing really out at the boardwalk, right? So in those remote locations, we do have other technology that we've deployed in areas where we don't have hydro or cellular and that type of thing, and have had captured images. I wouldn't say successful convictions, but has led us down the right path to put in more mitigating efforts to stop it. The second example you mentioned, yes, and that's one where the system I just referred to, we put in at that site. But that's a site we could look at a more permanent solution.
Yeah, and like Lakewood Park, when I'm looking at is, overseeing the parking lot as they move out. If you can get, usually, you can kind of figure out when they're there doing their, they're nasty, so to speak. And then if we could capture license plates on the way out.
Yeah, and sorry, Your Worship, thank you. And as technology improves, we are seeing the ability to do so. And we have had, again, some successes in capturing and identifying license plates in certain incidents. So we'll be diligent to keep improving technology in the areas identified.
All right, thank you. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Move on to bylaws, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council has before it for its consideration this evening, the following bylaws for first and second reading. Bylaw 2023-068, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement between the town of Tecumseh and the Golden Age Club. Bylaw 2023-078, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of agreement between the town of Tecumseh and Dillon Consulting Inc. And this is relating to engineering consultant services for the Scully St. Mark's pump station. Bylaw 2023-082, Antaya Drain Tender Award, and bylaw 2023-083, Demonte Drain Tender Award. And if council wishes to also do the same this evening, that those four referenced bylaws also be considered for third reading. And finally, Mr. Mayor, due to the disclosure of pecuniary interest earlier this evening, we ask that bylaw 2023-084 Go and Drain Tender Award be considered by council separately for first, second, and third reading.
All right, thank you very much. On the first four, move to readings, Councillor Jobin, and supported by Councillor Houston. No further questions. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Three readings are now in order. Councillor Higginson, Councillor Dorner, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. We'll move on to bylaw number 5, which is the 2023-04 Going Drain Tender Award. Move two readings by Councillor Higginson, supported Councillor Dorner. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. And three readings now in order, Councillor Higginson and Councillor Dorner. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Unfinished business? Any new business? Then a confirmatory bylaw on this evening's proceedings is now required. Councillor Houston, supported by Councillor Jobin. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Any notices of motion? Our next meeting will be Tuesday, August the 8th, 2023, 4 p.m. We had a PNP committee meeting, 6 o'clock, an in-camera meeting, and at 7 o'clock, our regular council meeting. If there's no further questions or comments, adjournment's in order. Councillor Higginson, Councillor Dorner, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you very much. And members of council, administration, and those who are streaming from the comforts of home, we bid you good night, and this meeting is now adjourned.